So let's look at two sets of experiments. Both were Pascaline Dupas, who is a professor at UCLA, was involved in both of them. The first one was conducted with Jessica Cohen. In this place, in and around this place, which is called Busia in Kenya, this hotel, you can see that the beginning of the hotel is called Blue York, where I spent a lot of time. And so what did they do? They randomly chose clinics, prenatal clinics, and they gave them nets to give to people who come for their prenatal exam, either at 0 or at 20 shilling or at 30 shilling or 40 shilling. So the unit of randomization is the clinic. And then they compare how many bed nets they sold and whether the bed net got used, and therefore the effective coverage in those clinics. And this is what they find. So the little vertical line here is the confidence interval. So it's taking into account all the noise that exists in the data. And so what is the conclusion from this graph at 3, 10 shilling, 20 shilling, 40 shilling? This is a number of net sold per week, I think.
What does that indicate if the customers actually use the bed net?
No, this is just, so far this is the first look at, which is just how many bed nets were given out. Yeah. The demand curve downward, and it's quite steep, right? Basically at 40 shilling, which is still heavily subsidized, because the full price of a bed net is more like 80 shilling. You distribute only about 10 bed nets per week versus 40 per week when you give them for free. So it goes down quite steeply. And remember, because they were randomly selected, we know that it is due to the price and not due to differences across those regions. Yeah.
I guess how strong can you say that because the error bars are pretty big. If you look at the lower error versus the higher error, it's 3 and 40.
So you see, take this one compared to this one. That's the confidence interval. So we are 95% confident that the truth is somewhere in between there. That's the 95 confidence interval, and they don't overlap. Right? So you can know that this is systematically different from this. You write that this and this, the confidence interval overlap, and in fact the numbers are quite similar. This is why I had drawn, to answer someone who was asking why didn't I draw the elasticity, that's why I had drawn it that way. Because I already knew the answer to the question. I was ahead of the game slightly. So 0 to 10 is not such a big difference. Maybe 10 is not that expensive. But 40 is definitely different from 3. You're right. We know we would like those bars to be smaller. If we had more observations, they would be. They would be even more precise. Yes?
Were the clinics for apart from each other? Clinics are good because, like, say I go to the clinic where I have to pay 20 shillings, and then my neighbor told me, oh no, but you can get it for free at the other one.
Right, that's a very good point. Did people shift from one clinic to the other? So they couldn't really do that because the clinics were quite far away. On the other hand, what they did find is a lot more people coming to the clinic, presumably to get the bed net, which is a good thing because it cross-subsidizes other services that you get in the clinic, in particular a test for HIV. And if the mother is HIV positive, then you can give them nevirapine just before the delivery to prevent the transmission to the mom. So that's another story, which is a reason why you might want to distribute bed nets if people like them. Now this was your question, which is, but are people using them? And so for the usage, you can ask people what they tell you, but they could lie, or you can try and go to their home and see whether you see the bed net. And here, what's the conclusion? So this is conditional on having gotten a bed net. So what they did is that they took the register, they saw who got a bed net, and they went to their home and said, what are you doing with the bed net? Is it a fishing net, or are you using it for a bed net? And what do they find?
What's the y-axis instead of?
So it's percentage divided by 10. So it's 0%, 20%, 40%, 60, 80, 100. So overall, about the trend, what do you have to say? It seems pretty similar. It seems pretty flat. So there is no very big evidence that how much you paid for a bednet influence whether or not you're going to use it or not. And it's not at 100. It's more like towards 60 to 70%. So not everybody uses the bednet. But how much they pay for it is not a function of, doesn't affect whether or not they use it or not. Interestingly, is when they went back 6 months to a year later, more people are likely to use them. So some people just took them because they were free, maybe, or they were not very expensive, and decided to keep them, store them for future usage, which is also something you can do. So people do not seem to be using, to not use the bednet because they got them for free. And the result is that if you look at the effective coverage is very strongly declining with price. So the conclusion from their study was that you should give the bednets for free because you get many more bednet out. You're much more likely to go, if you get them for free, you're going to be above 60% coverage. And once you go above 60% coverage, you're going to be more likely to, to buy them. But before you go, I want to give you the epilogue, which is so this is the reading I asked you to say, which is so this got posted on Danny Roderick's blog under the title Jeff Sachs Vindicated, which is to say, oh yeah, we should give bednet for free. This experiment showed that. And then people complained and said, this is only pregnant women, and the pregnant women all need the bednet, so they are going to use it at any price. The sunk cost effect won't be there for pregnant women. And secondly, it's Kenya, where bednet are still quite well known. So what are people objecting? People are objecting to saying the experiment gives you a lot of internal validity. We know now that in this specific context of clinics in Western Kenya with pregnant mother, there is no effect of the price you pay on whether you use. But maybe this doesn't apply to Uganda, maybe it doesn't affect to non-pregnant women, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a question of external validity. So what's the solution when you have when this kind of question are raised? What's the solution to make progress? You can't ignore this question. They are very good questions. What's the solution to make progress? Yes?
Try it in other areas.
You want to try it in other areas. So in fact, in bednets, this got done. So this got tried first in different countries, so in Uganda and Madagascar. And secondly, it got tried in Kenya, but for, as I was going to say, real people, not pregnant women, but people from the market, men and women. And here, voucher got given at various prices to individuals for them to pick them up in the shop. So now this is an environment where you would have expected to be more likely to find a sunk cost effect. Moreover, the experiment was also done to look at these longer-term consequences. So after 6 months, they went back again to the same people and tried to sell them a bednet for 100 shillings. So not the lowest price and not the highest price. And so the question is, the people who got the first bednet for free, are they more likely to buy the second one for 100 shilling, or are they less likely to buy the second one for 100 shilling? So I'll run you to the result quickly. So they find the same effect of price on purchase, that the more you pay, the less you get, quite steeply. They find the same lack of effect of price on whether you use. And so this is not pregnant women anymore. So this kind of generalizes a bit the result. And this is the effect on future purchases. The confidence bar a little bit high. But if anything, what you find is that people are more likely to buy a second bednet when they got it for free or almost free than when they were offered the option to pay for one. And this is despite the fact that at that time they already had a bednet. So presumably their need for a second bednet is less so. So it seems that the learning effect dominates the entitlement effect. So if we go back to the wrecking market story, or to your sustainability question, you could say, well, actually, giving a sweep of bednets for free might be a good way to create a market, because you create a demand among people who start learning and say, oh, actually, it's kind of nice, those bednets idea. The last way in which you create a demand is by creating this first user of a bednet. So this is the last graph that I'm going to show you. This is the purchase of a bednet if you had to pay for it, if none of your neighbors got it for free. And this is the purchase of a bednet if you had to pay for it, if all of your neighbors got it for free. And that is randomly assigned because depending on who your neighbors are, where they are located, what kind of voucher they get, this is just random whether they get this one. And what you see is that the more if your neighbor got bednets for free, you're more likely to get one. So there is actually a positive social effect. So the reason why I went in detail into this experiment is that that's an experiment that shows us how we can use experiment not only to evaluate the impact of a policy, but to answer those questions that help us understand how people decide whether the entitlement effect is bigger or smaller than the learning effect, whether the sunk cost fallacy exists, how big the price elasticities are, etc. And we need to design the experiment to answer those questions. And then we can start informing the policy debate.